Welcome back to the Master Your Money podcast with me, Marini Jackson, your guide to mastering credit, building wealth, and creating financial freedom. Let's dive into today's episode. So, today we are going to talk about the three numbers that predict your financial future. So, we're going to go deeper today. In the last episode, we talked about having your financial reset in February and knowing that you're not behind, but you are at a great place where you can make some pivots and changes so you can get that momentum going for March. So, if you've ever said any of these, I make good money, so why am I stressed? I got a raise, but nothing happened. Or even every month feels tight. You don't have an income problem. Some people think, well, if I make more money, then that's going to solve the problem. Excuse me. Income is not the problem, but you have a cash flow structure problem. And today I'm going to teach you three powerful concepts that I use with my clients. And the first is called cash flow gap. The second is your debt pressure ratio. And the third is your financial stability margin. And these three numbers will tell you the real story about your money. So with number one, the cash flow gap. And this is the simplest but most ignored number. And your cash flow gap is your income minus your core expenses. So this is something that I personally do every single month, and I recommend that you do this as well. So your core expenses, include your housing, your utilities, food, transportation, insurance, and your minimum debt payments. And we're not talking about any type of lifestyle spending yet. Notice I didn't say nails done, makeup, hair, clothes, shoes, etc. So this is just basic living. And this is what we call your survival spending. So again, that number equals to your cash flow gap equals to your income minus your core expenses. So if this number is positive, you have some breathing room. If it's zero, you're fragile. And if it's negative, you're actually financially bleeding. And a negative cash flow gap means that you're using your credit cards to survive, you're borrowing from your savings, and you're one emergency away from crisis. And here's the truth about it. You can't invest your way out of a negative cash flow gap, and stability comes before wealth. I know we hear so much right now about investing, investing in this crypto, investing in this stock, and this particular ETF, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's going to be the next big thing or is the thing to do right now. But you want to make sure those core expenses are taken care of. And one thing that my pastor has said in the past is that you never want to be in a place where you're one paycheck away from, essentially poverty. Like if you missed getting paid, for instance, if you got your income from your employment stopped, then that would mean that you wouldn't be able to live. You'd be on the streets. You'd be either evicted from your home or your apartment. That's not a good thing. So again, if that number is positive, meaning your income minus your core expenses, then you have some breathing room. If it's zero, then you're in a fragile state. And if it's negative, then you're financially bleeding. So the second number that we're going to talk about is your debt pressure ratio. Now let's talk about the weight of debt. I've shared on previous podcast episodes about myself and debt. And few people know how much pressure their debt creates. I've said, previously that, I wouldn't open the mail. I'd feel so much guilt and shame because I knew I had debt and I knew I couldn't pay it off. So, with your debt pressure ratio, what you're going to do is you're going to take your total, excuse me, I'm gonna grab a drink of water really quick. So, your debt pressure ratio equals your total monthly debt payments divided by your monthly take home pay. That means your net pay, not your gross pay, your net pay. And that's what's called your take home pay. So, what the numbers mean, if your debt pressure ratio, again, which is your total monthly debt payments divided by your take home pay, if that is under 15%, excuse me, you are healthy. If it's between 15 and 30%, your finances are tight, but they're manageable. If that number is between 30 and 40%, that means you're in a stress zone. And if it's over 40%, you're you're having a financial suffocation. And this is different from traditional debt to income ratio or metrics that lenders use. We hear a lot about that. Like I know when I purchased my home, I didn't have I had a job, and then I had some debt. Like I had student loan debt, and I remember them talking about debt to income ratio. But basically, your debt pressure ratio, it measures your emotional and your operational pressure. Because when 35% of your income is already spoken for before you can buy your groceries, you start to feel it. So that debt pressure impacts your ability to save, your ability to leave a job, your ability to say no, and your peace. And debt isn't just math, it's margin theft. So again, like I said, if you already know 35% of your paycheck is already gone before you even can buy groceries, you're only operating off of like 65% of the money you take home because you know you have to pay those debts. So when you have that debt pressure, I know for me, I've said this. I've worked for jobs where the term now people use like rage quit, and that's basically where you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, and you just say, I quit, and you walk out, and you know you're gone with the wind. Whatever happened before, whatever work responsibilities, you just don't have it anymore. And some people can do that. I know somebody who just one day said that they quit and now they are an entrepreneur and doing well. They actually had started with with their business prior to leaving that job, but they were doing it on a very part-time basis. But then, being that they had a lot more time on their hands from leaving that job, then they became very successful in their particular or they are very successful in their industry. But everyone doesn't have that option. Everyone can't just go in and just say, I quit. Some people may be single, but they have a lot of debt, whether it's student loan debt, their mortgage, their car, credit cards. They can't just up and leave and quit if they don't have a plan and they're not prepared. Also, if someone is a single parent and they have multiple children and that person's the only income source, they may not be able to, up and leave a job. They may not be able to say no to some things. and they may not be able to save. And that can get to a really stressful spot for a lot of people. So that debt can create a lot of pressure. And I personally, as I've said before, have felt that pressure knowing I had debt, couldn't pay it, and just feeling like hopeless, condemned. And I'm a believer. I'm saved, a follower of Jesus Christ, and had this crazy debt and didn't see a way out. So some people think, well, I'm just going to pray and everything's going to be okay. Yes, pray, but then you also have to have, like we mentioned in the previous podcast, having a system in place. So those are definitely things that are important. Now, the third thing we're going to talk about is your financial stability margin. And this is where maturity comes in. We have to be mature with our finances because your financial stability margin is essentially what's left over after your income minus your core expenses minus your debt payments. And this is your true flexibility number. This is letting you know whether you have the money and ability to save, to invest, to build emergency reserves, fund opportunities, and create options for yourself. And when you have a strong stability margin, this allows you to absorb emergencies without panic. An example of this would be, like, I know I have a friend who had, I don't know if she said someone ran into her house, like they ran a car into her home. It was like a brick house too. And she was able to, still live in her home. That area was just, blocked off where it was, the work was being done. But I know that she had relatives out of state. She was always going to visit her relatives, her daughter, her grandchildren. But that's because she was at a place of financial stability. Some people, may not have that. Also, when you know your financial stability margin, that determines your ability to build your emergency reserves. Again, I said fund opportunities and create options. So again, that strong stability margin, in addition to helping you to absorb emergencies without panic, it helps you and lets you negotiate with confidence. You're not having to go to a car dealer and being at the mercy of the lender, the bank lender, or the finance person who may say, oh, we're giving you a 26% loan and you have to take it because you need this car, different things of that nature. And it also reduces your money anxiety. And having a weak margin on the opposite end of that spectrum, it keeps you reactive and it makes small problems feel big. For instance, if you have a weak margin and your dishwasher breaks, then you may be like, oh my gosh, I can't go on. But if you have a stronger margin, then you can, just go to the store, buy the dishwasher of your choice quickly and get that taken care of and replaced with no issues. And then also with the weak margin, it turns inconvenience into crisis. So things that may just be an inconvenience, like I'll go with the dishwasher example, then, minor inconvenience, maybe a pump or an electrical part, went out on it, and that becomes such a huge thing. Like, oh my gosh, where am I going to get this extra money? I have to pay for the actual appliance and then have it delivered, the old one hauled away, and it just becomes a huge thing. So All of this is important because most people focus on how do I make more money? And I've been there. I've tried to solve the problem with try to solve a behavioral problem with simply adding more money to that equation. And what that does is it just amplifies the problem. I've personally experienced this where I had a side hustle and made decent money at it, but there were some parts of it where it actually cost me money, and it took me away from the primary thing that I wanted to do. It divided my time and my focus. I was a lot more tired, and sometimes before you even think about let me make more money, let's look at these behaviors, the patterns. Let's put a system in place. Let's eat this elephant one bite at a time. So, as I mentioned, systems. If your systems are broken, more money is going to increase your lifestyle, increase your debt, and increase the pressure that you have. And without fixing the structure, you're not fixing the problem. Just throwing more money at or adding more money is just going to increase your problems. So, this is why some high earners can feel broke. If you've ever heard the term lifestyle creep, some people may have started with not a lot of money, and some people just say, I'm tired of living paycheck to paycheck. I'm tired of budgeting. When I make it, or when I make more money, then I'm going to buy the things that I want. I want these experiences. I want to do this. I want to go here. I want to drive this. I want to live in this place. I want to wear this. So, some high earners feel broke because they've allowed that lifestyle creep to come in. And again, as I said, the issue isn't your income, it's your margin. So, what you need to do if you discover a problem, if you discover that your numbers are in the danger zone for your cash flow gap, for your debt pressure ratio, and for your financial stability margin, I want you to pay attention. So, number one, if your cash flow gap is negative, cut one category immediately. Just one. Also, increase income short term if necessary. And this can look like, I've known people who their ultimate goal was let me buy a home, and they got a second job now, or a second source of income. I know years ago, I used to run with a running group, and our running coach, in addition to working with us as his group, he had private clients, but also he had a job because he had a daughter in college and he was paying for that. So instead of him, I'm pretty sure of course didn't get into like this financial discussions with him, but instead of his daughter having to take out student loans or him taking out parent loans, he was working a second job. And when his daughter graduated, he quit that job. He quit the second job. So if you have to, again, increase your income short term if necessary, do so. And pause investing until you're stabilized. I know a lot of people, again, as I said, have talked about, invest in this and, crypto and all of these different things, but pause. You can always come back to investing, but your main goal right now is to get your cash flow gap into the positive. If your debt pressure ratio is high, seek to refinance. If you have a car or a home, if you're a homeowner, then you can seek to refinance. And when you refinance, that means that you're, I, I will say this because I did have a friend at my gym a few years ago ask me about refinancing. And he went to, I think, to his bank, and he was just inquiring about refinancing, and he had a low rate, but the rates that the bank were offering were higher than his current interest rate for his home. So, you know, and he asked me about it, and he's like, and I told him basically the same thing the banker told him, that if you have a lower interest rate right now than what, you know, refinancing would be, then, stay where you are. You may have to, evaluate your spending, things of that nature. But if it is advantageous for you to refinance, get a lower interest rate, a lower monthly payment for your home, your car, etc., definitely do that. If you choose to consolidate strategically. Now, and I don't recall which podcast episode, but I did share my experience where I consolidated a student loan, and that long term did not work in my favor. So consolidate strategically. Again, I'm going to go back to my example with refinancing, because at the time I consolidated, I didn't know what I know now. But when I consolidated that student loan, my interest rate went up. It initially was a federal loan, and then it became a private loan. And I didn't have some of the same advantages or incentives for, longevity of paying on-time payments as I did when my loan was a federal loan. So read the fine print. I'm always, always, always going to tell you, with any financial decision you're looking to make, ask questions and read the fine print. Use either the snowball or avalanche method. And basically, the snowball method with your debt is paying the smallest debt. That means the smallest dollar amount. And then you're once that debt is paid off, rolling that payment you would have paid for the smallest one into what you're paying for the next largest one, and so forth until your debts are paid off. The avalanche method is you simply selecting the debt with the highest interest rate, paying that off first, and then you're continuing to pay the minimum balances on all other debt. And also, stop adding new debt immediately. And this is something I've personally had to work on. Adding new debt could be, if you have a credit card, your credit card balance is one thing, and you're using your credit card consistently and telling yourself, well, I'm just going to pay it, but you don't have a system in place on paying that off. Don't add new debt. And then finally, if your stability margin is thin, delay lifestyle upgrades. I know a lot of people want to upgrade, and this is a time a lot of people want to elevate their look, their car, their home, have aesthetically pleasing and matching dishware and all of these, beautiful and wonderful things. Nothing wrong with those, but I will say for myself, like I, have seen YouTube creators put out content, and they're like, oh, I have these beautiful glass, like I'm into meal prepping. So they have these beautiful, glass containers, excuse me, that they meal prep with. I would love to do that. I'm not there yet. I have some basic plastic containers that I meal prep. No, it may not be the most environmentally friendly, but right now, switching out everything to glass is not the highest priority for me. Also, automate your savings before spending. I mentioned how I have a savings account where I automate it, automate those savings. So make sure that you automate your savings before you spend anything. And that can look like, for instance, if your goal is to save out of every paycheck a certain dollar amount or percentage of that paycheck, then what you can do is the day your paycheck hits, let's say you get paid on Fridays, make sure that you also schedule the draft or I'm trying to think of the word, but make sure you schedule that savings to go out of your account the same day. So the same day your paycheck hits, same day that you're having a dollar amount transferred to your savings account. And then finally, you also want to focus on increasing your income intentionally, not emotionally. So we'll talk about that in a bit more depth a bit later, but look at ways you can increase your income, and it doesn't have to be dramatic. Remember, last week I said we're not being dramatic, but that could look like if you have unused items in your home, for instance, that are gently used in good condition. You can have a yard sale. I know some people still do that. You can post it on Facebook Marketplace or eBay or Poshmark or your favorite way that you sell items. And that can help you to increase your income. And that's something that you're doing intentionally. It may be something that you can't wear anymore, or you don't like the style, or things of that nature that could use a good home. So think about that. And this is your mindset shift. Your income gives you lifestyle. Your margin gives you peace. And your stability gives you power. So again, your income gives you lifestyle. Your margin gives you peace. And your stability gives you power. And financial maturity is measured not by what you earn, but how much flexibility you control. Because there have been, and I know you've probably heard stories of people who are very wealthy, whether they were an athlete, an entertainer, etc., where they're making oodles of money, but they're broke. So you want to make sure that you have flexibility that you can control. So I'll leave you with this question. Do you know your numbers, or are you guessing your way through your finances? So again, remember last week we talked about making sure you pulled all of your accounts, know your information. And this week we talked about your cash flow, your stability margin, and your debt pressure. So take a few minutes and write those numbers down. So that way you know your numbers and you're not guessing your way through your finances.